oil shale, but it is a dimension of the problem that existed in 1979. The two processes that I've mentioned, the injection of a supercritical fluid which flushes out the kerogen out of the rock and so on, is CO2, and that's recycled. That becomes the problem today, the carbon footprint, how to get that manageable. On neither the Chevron nor the Shell process is going to be water intensive. And they have to be sensitive to the Colorado River Basin because that is the source of the water, and they have to share the water under 21st century standards. So I believe that the water problem is less under technology change than it was. I think you can follow that. What has changed is the fact that you've got a carbon-based material and you have to capture the carbon, the CO2, use it, inject it, store it. And that's what's going forward under the BLM leases today. So there's no surprise that the carbon footprint is integrated in shale development. It's not hostile to it. Is there another? Yeah.
I'm Kurt Couchman with Sunoco. If you look at a map of where the pipelines that run crude in the U.S. are and where the refineries in the U.S. are, middle American refineries, that is Ohio and Texas, Oklahoma, the middle part of the country has access to crude through pipelines running pretty much from anywhere to anywhere. If you look at the coasts, California and the East Coast, in particular the Philadelphia region, they don't have crude pipelines that run to them. And so even if this oil shale is developed to the point where it's commercial, or when it's developed to the point where it's very commercially available, getting it to a significant portion of domestic refining capacity is going to be a bit of a problem. Are there any policies that you would recommend to change the current ability to site crude pipelines to overcome state and local opposition which currently handle the regulations?
There are current pipelines in the Piceance Basin, Rio Blanco County, running to Salt Lake. Salt Lake is a pipeline connected. The infrastructure was put in place, and refining and upgrading, again, in Salt Lake. It has a regional component. But I would not, what I would do is look at a very interesting development. The Canadians faced a pipeline problem as well, and a refining problem with their tar sands in Alberta. So a leading Canadian company and ConocoPhillips decided to reinvest or invest in each other. ConocoPhillips will make its refineries in the lower 48 available to tar sands product, bitumen, coming through. That's the twin of kerogen coming out of the tar sands. So the tar sands from Alberta will go to 2 or 3 U.S., mid-U.S. refineries. This is the adaptability on the refining issue to get both tar sands and oil shale to market, to refining, and get it into the system as well. So it has not arisen. It has not become a problem in terms of the development. The obstruction to development is not transportation at this point. Perhaps in Utah there is somewhat. Utah has some tar sands and some shale, and they will have to connect Utah into the pipeline infrastructure. It might be a little different. Utah has about 12 billion barrels of oil shale against the Colorado, and Wyoming is another player in that as well. I should say before we go that if you want a measurement, when you're asked about this, per ton of rock, in Colorado, 35 gallons of oil, roughly. And then it declines in Wyoming to 20, 25 gallons. So Wyoming is less economic than Colorado, and so on. So visualize a ton of rock, because this is unorthodox in terms of petroleum, and what the rock will yield in terms of gallons. And it is economic at 25 for 1 ton. That is now economic at $20 to $25 cost, and so on. And you all know the geopolitical issues. I don't want to enumerate the world perspective on, one, the declining space for private shareholder-held American or non-American companies in a world where the national oil companies are changing contracts, expropriating Caracas, Venezuela, and diminishing the exploration space in the world for the same companies who are in Colorado, Shell, Chevron, and so forth, and the geopolitical risk out there and so forth. This is a call to, it's an anomaly. It becomes almost an irrational resource question. Why is a resource that way in the United States not developed? And why is there so much silence around it? And so forth.
What would you say is your answer to that question? Why, in your opinion, is there so much silence, and is this resource so underdeveloped?
What's the reason for this?
Exactly.
Well, the reason for this is historic in a way, uncertainty over price. And that's why I said the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, goes first. If the president declared we're going to buy the oil, then where do you buy it? You can stimulate the industry that way. And the second is the episodic way shale is handled. In other words, when the Heritage Foundation said, what's the best way to present the lecture, I said, Back to the Future. Because every geologist that went to school at Colorado School of Mines and got his degree, the professor of geology put on a pyramid. And the pyramid was, if you studied geology from the 20s on, was at the top was your conventional oil, petroleum, from Texas. And as you got to the base of the pyramid was the hard-to-get stuff. Shale was almost at the bottom, and underneath shale was gas hydrates, which is even more difficult to get. But the professor would say to these students, who were petroleum engineers, one day we're going to get it, maybe the next century. And there were forecasts that the pyramid would open up as price and technology developed. This was in the American perspective from 1913 on. And my point is that the expectation that that cycle, the hydrocarbon cycle, was in place during this current crisis and has been essentially put off to the side by a combination of public, media, whatever issues, some of them I alluded to today, and of course by climate change. The issue on climate change is simple. The Congress debates it for 18 months, and I watched all the debates from one side and the other. And I was very confused because the debate took place within 5 minutes. A speaker from one faction or the other would say, we've got to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. The next speaker would say, oil. Now, do we mean dependence on foreign oil or imported oil, or do we mean dependence on oil itself? And if you look at it that way, there are two camps. Oil itself is available. It's abundant. 3.7 trillion barrels in unconventional oil in the world. We're halfway through the conventional. There's no, there was maybe a peaking out. You've heard the peak oil thesis, but the peaking out means that your discovering level is lower than it has been. You're not replacing as much as you did in conventional oil only. But when you peak oil, it simply means that the old pyramid comes into play. You move down the pyramid, and the peak is never reached. You're on a plateau, and then you're into unconventional hydrocarbons, oil. Now, those who say the issue is oil itself make themselves very clear. They want to move away from oil, all forms of carbon. They want a carbon-free world, and that is their position. But let's not confuse import dependency with that issue. Imported oil is not similar, it does not equate